Imagine for a moment that your mind is no longer pulled by everyday worries, but is settling down like a lake when the wind stops moving. All the hurried rhythms of life step away from you for a while. What remains is a slow, steady breath and a small, quiet light opening inside just enough for you to look at yourself without fear. I want you to step into that light for a moment because that is where every true story of healing begins. In a world full of noise where people walk beside each other, yet get lost in their own anxieties, there is a truth that has always existed. This truth is not loud, not demanding, not forcing you to believe. It simply stands there gentle like an open door, waiting for the moment you are tired enough to stop and look. I call this truth the inner voice, the voice every soul carries from the beginning, but often loses in the demands of life. Between the wide sky above and the quiet depth within, there is always a bridge. Not a bridge of stone or wood, but a bridge of light. You cannot see it with your eyes, but you feel it when your heart becomes still. This bridge carries you from chaos to peace, from confusion to clarity, from brokenness to renewal. All you need to do is step onto it slowly without rushing. Some words are not born to convince, but to awaken. They do not come to make you believe, but to remind you that you once believed. They do not come to teach you to become someone else, but to guide you back to yourself. The story you are about to walk into with me today is one of those words. It does not require you to be perfect, nor does it ask you to be strong right away. It asks only one thing: that you are willing to sit with your own heart. You may be carrying something heavy inside, a sadness without a name, a long disappointment, an old wound you thought had healed but still aches when touched. You may be moving forward as if nothing has happened, yet deep within you know you are tired. I understand that feeling because I have also stood where you stand, lost on my own path and wondering if another way exists. And that is why I want to share this story with you. Not to help you escape reality, but to help you see the strength resting quietly within. This strength is not loud, not demanding, not fighting for attention. It is like a silent and steady stream that can heal the deepest parts of you if you allow it to flow. Today, I want to walk with you onto that bridge of light. Each word you hear and each image that unfolds gently in your mind will be like stones beneath your feet, guiding you back to the peace that has always belonged to you. You do not have to hurry. You only need to be present. And here in this moment, that is enough. When you look back at your life, you will notice there are stretches of the path that seemed ordinary, yet ended up changing your entire direction. Not because the circumstances were too big, but because something inside you shifted in a single quiet moment. I have always believed that a human life is not shaped by events, but by the awareness we bring into each event. Some people walk through a challenge and become stronger. Others face the same challenge and fall apart. It is not because life is unfair, but because their minds decided the outcome in silence before the situation even spoke. Emmet Fox once said that the world is a mirror and the mind is the mold. What we hold within shapes what appears in our lives. It sounds simple enough to overlook, yet it is one of the most enduring laws of existence. You cannot carry an image of failure in your heart and expect to harvest peace. You cannot hold on to fear and hope the road ahead will become wide and bright. The mind does not betray you, it only reflects what you feed it. Someone once asked me if a single small thought can change an entire life. I said that a thought is only a seed and faith is the soil that allows it to take root. You may think of hope for a moment, but if the deeper layers of your heart still hold doubt, then the seed has no ground to grow. On the other hand, even a gentle belief that you are worthy of peace is enough to open the door for something new to enter. The law of the mind does not work through noise, but through steady quietness. If you carry the fear of being abandoned, you will find yourself repeatedly in situations that make you feel abandoned. Life is not doing that to you on purpose. You are simply viewing the world through the lens of that fear. And if you carry kindness within you, will notice that even in difficult circumstances, a helping hand appears. That is not a miracle. It is simply that you walk with a state of mind that recognizes goodness, so goodness finds you. The mind works like underground water. It is not loud, but it determines everything that grows on the surface. You may see chaos in your life, but if you look deeper, you will notice that the chaos is only the result of inner currents that have not been guided. Change the direction of those silent currents and the entire landscape of your life changes with them. I have met many people who say they want peace, yet they spend the whole day planting seeds of anxiety in their minds. They say they want love, yet inside they repeat the belief that they are unworthy. They say they want light, yet their eyes constantly look for signs of failure. I do not judge them because I know that each of us goes through seasons like that. We live in storms long enough that we forget the feeling of a calm sky. But the truth is that the mind always listens to what you repeat the most. It does not distinguish right from wrong. It only follows instruction. If you speak fear to it, it opens doors that lead to fear. If you speak love to it, it guides you to places where love can grow. The choice is always yours, even when you are not aware that you are choosing. Jerusalem in the old story represents a higher state of consciousness, a place where you feel steady, clear, and full of direction. But then there are days when you step out of that light and slide down to Jericho, the lower ground of the soul where doubt, exhaustion, and old wounds wait for you. You have had days like that. Have you not? One hurtful word, one small disappointment, one long, weary day, and suddenly you feel as if you have fallen into a deeper place without noticing. And it is in moments like these that the thieves within begin to appear. Not thieves outside you, but quiet, harsh thoughts, old, painful memories, and soft whispers of self-blame. They beat you not with fists, but with sentences that convince you you are weak and alone. You are left on the side of your own life, a part of you wanting to rise, a part wanting to give up. But the law of the mind never closes. The very place where you fall is the place where you can begin again with a new choice, a new thought, a new inner position. It does not need to be large. It only needs to be true. It only needs to be gentle enough for your heart to believe that change is possible. I want to ask you something, and this question does not need an immediate answer. You only need to let it settle inside you. In the days when your heart is at its weakest, what are you repeating to yourself? That question may open the door to a quiet honesty. And from that honesty, the law of the mind has something new to work with. Because the miracle never lies in grand requests, but in the soft moment when you realize that you have the right to choose again what you will believe. Thank you for being here listening with me. There are days when you walk with a simple belief that you will be fine. Everything seems within reach. You think you are strong enough to endure, a little more patient enough to get through a small obstacle, clear enough to know what you are doing. We all have mornings like that when the mind still holds a faint light of an old hope. But there are also days when one small incident is enough to make you feel as if someone has pulled the strength out of your body. That is the moment of falling. It is not loud. It does not warn you. It is only a small crack, but enough for all the light to leak out. And you stand there, unable to understand why you suddenly feel so fragile. In the old story, the traveler is beaten and left by the roadside. But in your own story, the one that knocks you down does not carry weapons. It carries the shape of a careless sentence, a disappointment that lasts too long, a rejection you never expected, or simply the silence of someone you once hoped would stay. These wounds do not bleed. They make the soul ache in ways the eyes cannot see. When you fall, you are no longer the one walking with confident step. You become the one lying still, watching the world pass you by without having enough strength to lift a hand and call for help. You feel left behind on the road of your own life, while everyone around you continues on their way, and you remain stuck in a shadow you do not know how to leave. Falling is not failure. It is simply the moment when the truth inside you begins to speak. When you are tired, when you are drained, when you can no longer hold everything together, that is not a sign of weakness. It is a gentle reminder that you have been carrying too much in your heart without letting anyone see it. Even you, at times, refuse to admit it. There are wounds you have hidden so well that you believe you have forgotten them. But in the moment of falling, those wounds return not to torment you, but to tell you they still need healing. And if you do not stop to listen, they will find ways to call for your attention through repeated aches, unexpected sadness, or the feeling of being lost even when you are standing in a crowd. Someone once asked me if it is possible to avoid these moments of falling, and I said no. No one can live without moments of weakness. No one can walk forever on the bright road of Jerusalem. Everyone, at some point, will descend into Jericho, the lower ground of the soul, where fear, disappointment, and the feeling of abandonment rise up. This is not punishment. It is simply the structure of life, because human beings do not learn depth in the light, they learn it in the darkness. But you must understand something important. Falling is not the end. It is only the place where you begin to see the deeper layers inside yourself. When the ground cracks beneath your feet, it is not collapse. It is an invitation to look beneath to the place where old beliefs are breaking, so you can build something truer. The traveler in the story was robbed of his belongings, but in your life, what is stolen is not money, it is your peace. Sometimes it is your confidence. Sometimes your sense of worth. Sometimes your ability to see your own value. And when that peace is taken, you do not know what to hold on to. You try to rise by willpower, but the will is wounded. You try to stand by reason, but reason is surrounded by doubt. This is the stage where many people believe they have been abandoned. But that is not true. This is actually the moment when you are closest to the truth. Only when the noise around you fades can you hear the whisper within. Only when you have nothing left to cling to can you turn inward and find your real foundation. In that state of falling, you may feel useless, unworthy, or not good enough. These accusations are not the truth. They are only echoes of an old fear rising again. And that fear is not an enemy. It is a part of you that has been forgotten for too long now, returning to ask for healing. You do not need to push fear away. You only need to look at it with gentleness. Because in the place where you are weakest, love can enter the strongest. I want to say this to you with the deepest sincerity. You are not alone in the moment of falling. Every soul that has ever awakened has once lain on the road to Jericho. Every strong heart has had a day when it wanted to give up. And every person who has learned sacred love has begun at the point where they had lost all hope. When you fall, remember that it is not the end. It is simply the place where you are invited to be more honest with yourself. And that honesty will be the first step for you to rise again, not with the old strength, but with a new strength, deeper, steadier, and more truly yours than anything you have carried before. When you fall, you often hope someone will notice you, someone who will stop, touch your pain, and say something kind enough to help you hold on for one more day. Yet strangely, in the moments you need the most, what comes to you is often empty form. People say familiar lines that do not touch your heart. They offer advice that sounds reasonable but does not reach the place inside you that is hurting. And you feel as if you are wandering in a world where everyone is more occupied with maintaining their own appearance than stopping long enough to truly see you. In the old story, the priest and the Levite passed by the wounded man. They looked, they recognized, but they did not stop. They walked quickly, carrying the dignity of their titles, carrying the garments of their social roles, but inside them was a fear of facing real pain. They were not evil. They were simply symbols of the part within us that chooses safety over honesty. They stand for knowledge without heart, for religion, without life, for kindness, that exists only in theory, but never steps onto the ground to act. You have been like that too, have you not? You have comforted yourself with words that sounded strong, yet did nothing to help you rise. You have hidden your hurt behind a smile so no one would ask more questions. You have done everything you could to maintain an image of being fine, while inside you were slowly cracking. If so, then you understand that the priest and the Levite are not other people. They live within you. They are the habits of avoidance, the layers of logic that keep you from truly facing the wound you have carried for so long. Knowledge without compassion is only a dim lamp. It lights the theoretical path, but cannot warm a cold heart. The lines you have learned from books, the principles you have memorized, can become hollow if you use them as shields against your real emotions. Someone once told me they had read many books about healing, yet the more they read, the drier they felt. I understood that. Because knowledge blooms only when it touches the heart. If not, it becomes another wall you build to protect yourself from your own vulnerability. Form, no matter how beautiful, cannot lift a wounded heart. You can attend every service, recite prayers, fluently write pages of positive affirmations, but if each of those actions is done only to avoid looking at the fractured parts inside you, they cannot bring you real peace. Transformation does not happen in form. It happens in the moment you admit the truth in your heart with gentleness. It begins when you face your pain without judging it, without explaining it, without trying to justify it. It begins when you simply look at it, breathe with it, and refuse to abandon it again. Sometimes you become your own Levite. You see your own exhaustion, but you ignore it. You know you need rest, but you push a little harder because you fear disappointing others. You hear the call of your inner voice, but you are swept up by duties, expectations, and the image you believe you must maintain. You walk past yourself and you do not stop. This is not your fault. It only shows that you have lived too long in a world that values appearance, perfection, and the image of being in control. No one taught you that vulnerability is a kind of strength. No one taught you that slowing down to feel is an act of courage. No one told you that sometimes simply admitting I am hurting is the first step toward healing. I have gone through the same. I used knowledge as a wall to hide my fear. I tried to appear strong so no one would see my weakness. I believed that if I understood enough, I would never collapse. But one day, when the truth shattered through, when I could no longer use form to hold myself together, I finally understood that knowledge can never replace compassion. And compassion must begin with myself. Look at your life. How many times have you told yourself everything will be fine as a kind of spell when all your heart needed was to be heard? How many times have you encouraged others to be strong while you were exhausted? How many times have you held back your tears to keep your image intact? Those things are not strength. They are habit. And habit leads you to keep walking around your pain just as the priest and the Levite did. Only when you truly stop and face what is making you tired do you open the door for the Samaritan within you to step forward. This Samaritan does not care how you look, what you have achieved, or how well you have kept your image. This Samaritan wants only to know if you are hurting and whether you will allow yourself to be cared for. And that is where healing begins, in the moment you stop walking around yourself, and for the first time you stay. I have lived long enough to know that within every person there is a light that no circumstance can extinguish. This light may fade at times or be covered by thick clouds of fear, disappointment, or old wounds, but it remains silent and steady, waiting for the moment you slow down enough to notice it. And every time you face your own pain, this light is the first to speak. It is the Samaritan within your soul. The Samaritan in the old story was not an extraordinary man. He was an ordinary person, even looked down upon in his time. Yet, he was the one who stopped, tended the wounds, lifted the fallen man, and paid the cost to save someone he did not know. What made him different was not status knowledge or perfection. What made him different was that he let love lead him. He did not avoid. He was not afraid of inconvenience, of judgment, or of being misunderstood. He listened to the call of compassion, a call that speaks only when the heart is wide enough to feel beyond logic. That call exists in you too. I know this because I have seen many people who believed they could not love deeply, yet, when faced with something honest and real, they became gentler than they ever imagined. You have had moments like that, moments when you could not abandon someone in pain, moments when you could not turn away, even though you were tired, moments when you could not ignore your own suffering. Those moments are the proof that sacred love does not come from effort, but from the nature of your soul. The Samaritan did not stand on the other side of the road, wondering if what he was about to do made sense. He did not measure. He did not question whether the wounded man deserved help. True love does not ask those questions. It simply recognizes pain and moves toward it. Love always has one natural movement to go where it is most needed. And if you look back at your own life, you will see that you too have moved this way instinctively before your mind had the chance to interfere. But what I want you to understand more deeply is this. The Samaritan is not someone from a story meant only to inspire you. He is the highest part of you, the part that does not judge, does not shrink from vulnerability, does not run away from truth. The part that always sees you as worthy of love even when you do not. The part that knows you can stand up even when you are lying down. The part that knows every wound can become a doorway for light if you do not close it. You may have heard this inner call before, but you were unsure whether you had enough strength to be a Samaritan to others or to yourself. In truth, you do not need great strength. You only need willingness. A willing heart can do things that neither intellect nor willpower can reach. Willingness softens the armor you have worn for too long. It opens the way for gentler actions, deeper patience, and a truthfulness far more real than anything you have tried to force yourself to become. When I look at the actions of the Samaritan, I do not see heroism. I see the simplicity of love. He knelt. He touched the pain. He bandaged the wound. He lifted. He paid the cost. Nothing was complicated. Yet that simplicity was sacred. Because true love does not need noise. It does not need recognition. It only needs to live. And if you pay attention, you will notice that the love within you moves in the same way. It does not demand that you be perfect. It does not wait until you are fully healed. It simply asks you to slow down to see the pain that is present and not turn away. To stop before the pain that is the first step of the Samaritan. And it is also the first step of healing. You cannot heal what you keep avoiding. You cannot heal what you refuse to look at. But you can heal anything you have the courage to touch with love. I want to say this to you gently. The Samaritan is not someone else. He is you. And you have been him many times without noticing. Now is simply the moment for you to recognize this truth more clearly. When you do, you will no longer see yourself as the one lying by the road, but as the one who can step forward, who can touch, who can lift, beginning with yourself. So before we continue, I want to invite you to do something small yet real. If you are ready for the Samaritan within you to speak more clearly from today, leave a comment saying, "I am ready to change." This is not a promise to me. It is a promise to your own heart. Thank you for being here on this journey with me. I learned very early in my spiritual journey that it is not circumstances that break a person, but the way they look at those circumstances. Two people can face the same event, yet one collapses while the other grows. It is not because one is luckier, but because that person has eyes that can see into the essence of things. And that way of seeing changes the entire movement within them, eventually changing the life they live on the outside. In the old story, the first thing the Samaritan did was not bandage the wounds. It was not paying the cost. It was not lifting the wounded man onto his animal. The first thing he did, the most important thing, was that he looked, and his gaze was completely different from that of the priest and the Levite. They saw the same man, the same wound, the same situation. But they looked with avoidance, with fear, with attachment to form. The Samaritan looked with compassion. And in that moment, the entire direction of the story changed. I have always believed that you can change your whole life simply by changing the way you look at something small. Because a gaze is not just observation, it is a doorway through which energy flows. When you look with cold eyes, your heart shuts down. When you look with blame, your fear grows. But when you look with compassion, you awaken a hidden strength within you, the strength of life rising inside. When you change the way you see, you do not only change the object in front of you, you change yourself. I remember meeting a man whose life had collapsed around him. He no longer believed in his worth. He said everything in his world was falling apart. But when I asked him, "How do you see yourself right now?" he answered, "I see myself as someone no one needs and no one cares about." I did not blame him, because that gaze was not the truth. It was only a foggy mirror that pain placed before him. But when he believed that mirror, his life immediately reflected the same image back to him. The way you see is a silent declaration sent into the universe. The Samaritan looked at the wounded man with respect, not pity. He did not see a burden. He saw a human being. If you look closely, you will realize that every loving action begins with such a gaze. You cannot love what you refuse to look at. You cannot heal a wound you keep turning away from. The way you look at life is the way life responds to you. When you look at your wound with judgment, it tightens around you. When you look at it with gentleness, it begins to soften. When you look at others with defensiveness, you build walls. But when you look at them with understanding, even without many words, the barriers within you naturally fall. A gaze is the first step of healing. It is the key that opens the door. Without the right gaze, every solution becomes rigid. But with a gaze filled with compassion, even what seems immovable can shift. Think about yourself. How many times have you felt worse simply because you saw yourself through the lens of disappointment? How many times have you believed a relationship was ending simply because you looked at the other person through your own hurt instead of the truth? How many times has life felt heavy only because you saw it through eyes clouded by exhaustion? The problem is not in the event. The problem is in the way you see. And the beautiful thing is that your gaze can change. It is not fixed. It is not something frozen from yesterday that cannot be moved. You can look with new eyes anytime you choose. You can see yourself with appreciation instead of criticism. You can look at an old wound with gentleness instead of shame. You can look at life with the heart of the Samaritan, the one who always sees love as possible, even in the darkest moment. I want you to understand that your gaze is creative. It does not only record what is happening, it shapes what comes next. When the Samaritan looked at the wounded man with compassion, he rewrote that man's future in an instant. And when you look at yourself with compassion, you are also rewriting your own future. Many people believe they must change their circumstances first in order to change the way they see. But the truth is the opposite. You change your gaze first, and the circumstances follow. Not because magic appears from the outside, but because your inner world has shifted. And the outer world simply reflects that shift back to you. You cannot wait for life to soften before you learn to soften. You cannot wait for things to improve before you learn to see what is good. You cannot wait for others to change before you change the way you look at them. You are the beginning of the change. So I want to ask you something, a question not to be answered with the mind, but with the heart. When was the last time you looked at yourself with compassion? Just let this question stay with you. It will begin to open doors you did not know existed. If you are ready, we will continue this journey together in the next part. On the inner road to Jericho, there is a moment that determines the entire direction of a human life. It is not the moment of being wounded. It is not the moment of despair. It is not even the moment when the Samaritan sees the beaten man. The decisive moment is the moment he crosses the road. After many years of observing people on their spiritual journeys, I realized that most of their suffering does not come from the wound itself, but from the hesitation before an invisible boundary. They stand on one side of their pain, looking toward the other side where healing waits, yet they do not step forward. Not because they do not want to, but because they have stayed on this side for too long. This side of the road is the familiar place where you hold yourself together, to look strong, where you use logic to explain everything, where you avoid your real feelings, where you stay with a dry sense of safety, even while your heart is calling for help. It does not make you happy, but it is familiar, and people often choose what is familiar over what is good. The Samaritan saw the pain. But if he had only seen and then walked away, the story would have been no different from the priest and the Levite. What set him apart was not compassion alone, but compassion that became action. He left his place of safety, left his patterns, left the comfortable distance, and stepped into a space where he could be vulnerable. That is true courage, crossing the road. In your life, crossing the road is not a grand gesture. It can be a small choice, opening your heart instead of closing it, speaking a true word instead of a polite one, admitting you are hurting instead of pretending you are fine, sitting with your emotions instead of pushing them away. Each of these small actions is you crossing the road, moving from avoidance to honesty. And in that moment, a new direction begins. I have met many people who say they want healing, yet they remain on this side of the road. They read a lot, understand a lot, gather spiritual knowledge, yet they do not dare step forward to touch their real wounds. Knowledge cannot save you in that moment. Only action can. And the first action is always the same: stepping toward what you have been avoiding. Why is that step so hard? Because the other side of the road is the realm of vulnerability. And human beings fear vulnerability more than anything else. You fear that if you touch your pain, it will grow. You fear that if you admit your weakness, you will be judged. You fear that if you open your heart, someone may disappoint you again. You fear that if you face yourself honestly, you will discover things you are not ready to see. But remember this: what you fear most is often where the doorway to your freedom lies. When the Samaritan crossed the road, he did not know what he would face. The thieves could still be nearby. The wounded man could already be dead. He could be blamed for involvement. Yet he still stepped forward. Because love does not wait for perfect conditions. Love only needs a willing heart. You are the same. You do not need to be strong before you step. It is the stepping that creates strength, not the other way around. You do not need to wait until you stop hurting to face your pain. It is facing it that opens the path to healing. You do not need to wait until the fear disappears. It is walking through fear that teaches you fear has no authority over your direction. Imagine your heart as a room that has been locked for years. You stand outside looking at the door with worry, but only when you turn the handle and enter do you realize the room is not as frightening as you once thought. Light always finds a way, and as long as the room is open. Crossing the road is opening the door. When you begin to step, you will realize that sometimes the smallest action carries the greatest meaning. Sometimes one deep breath is enough to move you further than you expected. Sometimes simply standing closer to your pain instead of observing from afar changes your entire life. I have seen many souls transform because they chose one action that seemed small: a conversation they once feared, an apology, a moment facing an old memory, a time they said, "I need help," a minute sitting with themselves in silence. These are all steps of crossing the road. When you cross, you do not only come closer to your pain, you come closer to the sacred essence within you. Because that step is a declaration: the love in me is stronger than the fear in me. And when you declare that the universe begins to move with a new rhythm, no one else needs to change. No circumstance needs to become perfect. It is only you in this step. One small step, carried by compassion, has the power to change the direction of an entire life. So today, I want to invite you to pause for a moment. Place your hand on your heart and ask yourself, is there something within me waiting for me to cross the road and touch it? This question does not need an immediate answer. Let it stay. It will guide you where you need to go. When the Samaritan came near the wounded man, he did not rush to lift him up. He did not say grand words. He did not outline a long path of what should be done. The first thing he did was bend down, and in that bent posture he opened the small pouch he carried and took out oil and wine. Two simple, ordinary things, yet they hold a meaning far deeper than any speech. Because in the story, the oil and the wine did not only clean the wound, they symbolize the two things every soul needs in order to heal: gentleness and truth. I have always believed that love speaks two languages. One is the language that softens your heart, helps you breathe deeper, and reminds you that you are still worthy of love. That is the oil. The other brings clarity, revealing what you have avoided, showing the knots inside that quietly cause pain, the truths that must be faced for you to be free. That is the wine. One soothes, one cleanses, and both are necessary. Some people only want oil. They want comfort, tenderness, the feeling of immediate peace. But if you only use oil, the wound may soften, yet the fragments, the parts still inflamed, remain untouched. Comfort without truth can create the illusion that everything is fine, while the roots of pain continue to work beneath the surface. Some people only want wine. They want stern truth, relentless self-examination, self-discipline. But only wine will make the wound sting more. Without gentleness to support you, the soul can shrink, becoming too rigid and far from the softness needed to truly recover. Truth without compassion can turn into a blade. The Samaritan used both. That is what real love looks like. I once met a woman who carried many years of pain. She spoke of a childhood marked by abandonment of relationships that only deepened her belief that she was unworthy of love. She said she had been healing herself by journaling, reading, and analyzing her own mind. Yet strangely, the more she analyzed, the heavier she felt. I asked her, in all that you have done for yourself, is there any gentleness in it? She was silent for a long time. Then I said, you have used a lot of wine, but you have not used oil. In life, you may easily lean toward one or the other. When you are overwhelmed by hurt, you reach for oil to soothe yourself, so you will not have to face the truth inside. When you fear appearing weak, you reach for wine to discipline yourself and prove that you are strong enough. But healing becomes real only when both come together. When you know when to hold yourself and when to be honest with yourself, that is when the wound begins to heal. Oil is the gentle voice that whispers to you it is all right. You are trying. You are worthy of love. Wine is the steady voice that says you cannot keep carrying this pattern. You must release what is hurting you. Oil keeps you from collapsing. Wine keeps you from repeating old pain. The Samaritan did not choose one or the other. He chose both because he knew that love does not only comfort and truth, does not only correct. Love is the harmony between comfort and awakening. As you walk your healing journey, you too must carry both bottles with you. There will be days you need only oil, when you are exhausted, when you have just faced a storm, when you are too fragile to receive any advice. On those days you simply sit, place your hand on your heart and say, I am not failing. I am doing the best I can. Then there will be days you need wine, when you know you are holding on to what is hurting you, when you avoid the truth, when you allow negative thoughts to stay in your mind for too long. On those days you must say, I need to change. I cannot continue like this. Healing always lives in the balance. I have seen many people delay their own healing because they accept only half of this truth. One seeks comfort endlessly and runs from truth, so their pain only shifts shape. Another is too harsh with themselves, leaving their soul no space to breathe, to soften, to forgive. Both become weary, simply in different ways. But you are different. You are listening to this story for a reason. A part of you is ready for real healing, not decorative healing, not shallow healing, but healing that reaches the root. To do that, you must learn the art of using oil and wine at the right time. Look at your recent days. Are you too hard on yourself? Or are you so soft that you are drifting? Are you comforting yourself to avoid the truth? Or are you pressuring yourself to the point of losing breath? The answer is right here in the rhythm of your heart as you read these words. I want to tell you something with the deepest honesty. You deserve gentleness, but you also deserve the freedom that only truth can bring. Oil and wine are not opposing forces. They are two wings of the same bird. You need both to rise above the land where pain has kept you. If today you feel unsure where to begin, start with what the Samaritan did. Bend down to yourself without judgment and see what within you needs oil and what needs wine. That tender honesty will open the path you have been seeking. There is a truth I have experienced many times in my life. Healing does not begin with action. It begins with a gaze. When the Samaritan bent down beside the wounded man, the first thing that happened was not bandaging, but a shift in the way he looked. He looked with compassion, with connection, with the awareness that a soul was in pain. And that gaze opened the door for everything that followed. I have seen many people live their whole lives without ever being seen with such a gaze. They grow up in environments where the eyes turn toward them, carry judgment, expectation, disappointment, or coldness. Slowly they form within themselves the belief that they are not worth stopping for, that their pain is not important enough to be noticed. And then something sad happens. They begin to look at themselves with the same gaze. In those moments, they are like the wounded man lying by the roadside, not because they cannot stand up, but because they believe no one would stop. And so they remain there, not because the wound is too heavy, but because the gaze they turn toward themselves is too cold. Have you ever felt unseen in this way? Not unseen by the eyes, but unseen by the heart. Seen in the truest sense, seen as someone who exists, someone who matters, someone who is part of the living force trying to rise each day. If you have ever felt that, I want you to know it was not your fault. You simply have not met the right gaze. But from this moment on, you can learn to give that gaze to yourself. The Samaritan looked at the wounded man not as a burden, but as a soul that needed care. His gaze did not judge the wound. It did not ask for explanations. It did not measure how deserving the man was. It simply recognized that there was pain, and pain needs healing. I believe you have that ability too. You can look at yourself and others with such a gaze that softens the heart, opens the door, and allows the best parts of you to awaken. Many people think healing is a long and difficult journey, but sometimes what changes an entire life is only a different gaze. When you look with gentleness, your heart begins to remember what pain made you forget, that your worth remains whole, even when you feel broken. When you look with understanding, you see that your pain is not a sign of weakness, but a sign that your heart has loved and lost, has tried and grown weary, has lived truly. A heart that has lived will always have wounds, and those wounds are often what make it deeper, warmer, more human. A gaze is the bridge that carries you from chaos to peace. No one can bandage a wound they have not truly seen. No one can support what they have not acknowledged. And no one can heal themselves without daring to look at their own wound with gentleness, not with self-blame. In your journey, there will be moments when you stand before a mirror and see someone tired. Moments when you look in the bathroom mirror and see eyes red as if someone has been crying on your behalf for years. Moments when you look at your life and see unfinished places, forgotten dreams, pieces that do not fit. These are the moments when you must choose how to look. If you look with harshness, the wound may close quickly, but it will never truly heal. If you look with avoidance, the wound will continue to bleed beneath the surface. But if you look with compassion, strange happens, the wound begins to breathe. It is allowed to exist without being judged. It is allowed to heal without being hidden. It is allowed to be what it is. I want you to remember this. Your gaze can change your definition of yourself faster than any advice ever could. Try looking at yourself the way the Samaritan looked at the wounded man, a gaze that asks nothing, demands nothing, simply recognizes this is a soul in need of gentleness. If you can do that even for a moment, you have already changed the trajectory of your entire life. And now I want to ask you something as a way for you to check where your heart is on this journey. When was the last time you looked at yourself with gentleness instead of judgment? If you can share how you feel, I am grateful for your presence. Through many years of observing human life, I realize something: love only gains real power when it becomes action. The thought of love is not enough. The feeling of tenderness is not enough. Even good intentions are not enough to save a soul in pain. Between love and healing, there is always a small shift, the moment you allow love to take the shape of action. The Samaritan did not stand at a distance to feel compassion. He did not speak a few kind sentences and walk on. He acted. He bent down. He touched the bleeding wound. He lifted the injured man onto his own animal. He slowed his pace, perhaps far slower than he had planned. He changed his direction, changed the rhythm of his day, changed his own intentions. For one person, for one soul who needed him. I learned that real love always carries the shape of willingness to change. If you say you love, but you are not willing to shift anything in your habits, your schedule, your attention, then perhaps it is not yet the kind of love your soul is longing for. We often keep the best parts of ourselves for convenient moments. We say, when things settle, I will be kinder. When I am less tired, I will listen to others. When I am more stable, I will heal myself. But life does not follow that order. Healing is not a reward for those who survive difficulty. Healing is the action you take in the middle of difficulty. The Samaritan acted in an imperfect situation. He had no medical tools. He had little time. He did not know whether the thieves were still nearby. He did not know whether the wounded man would live. But he still acted, because he knew love does not wait for perfect conditions. Love only needs an open heart. In your life, that action may be something small: sitting down with your anger instead of pushing it away, calling a friend you have avoided because of shame, saying I need help instead of holding yourself together, alone, pausing on an exhausting day to breathe and check your heart. These are small acts, but they carry great power because each one says you chose love over fear. I once met a man who always said he wanted peace. But whenever uncomfortable emotions rose, he tried to look strong, tried to ignore them, tried to continue working as if nothing was happening. He said, I will deal with this feeling when I have time. But you know what happens when we wait to heal until we have time? We never have enough time, because wounds do not stay dormant to wait for us. They quietly surface through sudden anger, through long fatigue, through relationships that slowly fall apart. I told him peace is not solving your problems quickly. Peace arrives when you choose a loving action in the moment you feel most tired. And the same is true for you. When the Samaritan lifted the wounded man onto his animal, he taught us something important. Love is not afraid to slow down. It is not afraid to take a detour. It is not afraid to lose time. Love knows that sometimes the longer road is the true one. And there is something deeper in that act that I want you to hear with your whole heart. When you lift someone else, you are also lifting yourself. Every time you touch the pain of another with compassion, you are learning to touch your own pain. Every time you stay in a difficult moment without running away, you are training your heart to be stronger. Every time you choose kindness over defense, you free a part of your soul from the contraction created by fear. Loving action is never one way. It always returns to you as strength. I have seen people rise not because they were helped, but because they helped someone else at a moment when they believed they had nothing left to give. When they opened their heart, a new stream of energy flowed in. When they reached out, something in them was lifted too. That is the secret of sacred love. It heals both sides. And if you think you have nothing to offer, remember that the Samaritan carried nothing special except willingness. He had only oil, wine, and the ability to pause. But that pause became a miracle. In your life, the first loving act may simply be to pause. Pause to breathe. Pause to look at what is hurting you. Pause to ask, what do I truly need right now? Pause to speak one kind sentence to yourself, instead of repeating the old reproaches. Pause, so love has space to enter. And when love enters even through the smallest opening, it knows how to widen. It finds its way through the places you have kept closed. It softens the parts you believed were dead. It lifts you in ways neither willpower nor analysis ever could. The Samaritan did not heal the wounded man with philosophy. He healed with his hands, with presence, with action. And I believe that in your own life you are being invited into a similar kind of action, gentle but real, small but decisive. So, before we continue, I invite you to be silent for one moment. Place your hand on your heart and say to yourself today, I choose to act with love, even in the smallest way. There is a moment in the story of the Samaritan that I have always seen as the turning point of the entire journey. It is not when he bends down. It is not when he pours oil and wine. It is the moment he lifts the wounded man onto his own animal. This act carries a profound symbolic meaning because it speaks of something every life must learn: the ability to carry something heavy that you once believed you could not carry. Each of us holds an invisible burden. Some carry a long disappointment from childhood. Some carry the collapse of a relationship. Some carry the fear of being abandoned. Some carry wounds that repeat themselves. And some carry things they have never named, only knowing that something inside is always tired. When you have lain too long beside the road of your own life, you begin to believe you cannot rise again. But the truth is, this what you cannot do alone, you can do when you let love lift you. That love may come from others, or it may come from within yourself, from the Samaritan within, waiting for you to remember him. The Samaritan did not ask whether the wounded man deserved to be lifted. He did not ask why he was attacked. He did not ask whose fault it was. Love does not seek reasons. Love seeks direction, and the direction here is to lift up. I have met many people who, in their quietest moments, admit to me that what they fear is not the burden itself. They fear that no one will lift them when they no longer have the strength. And I understand that fear, because there are seasons of life when we must face the truth that no one comes, no one stays, no one crosses the road for us. But the beautiful thing is this: in those moments, the Samaritan within you becomes the clearest. Your soul always has the ability to lift you, even when your body is tired, even when your mind is tangled, even when your heart is hurting. Lifting yourself is not forcing yourself. Lifting yourself is not pretending to be strong. Lifting yourself is not denying your pain. Lifting yourself means accepting that you need to be lifted. And that is one of the bravest actions a human can take. When the Samaritan lifted the wounded man onto his animal, he taught us something important. Not every burden is meant to be dragged. Some burdens are meant to be lifted with gentleness. I remember a man who came to me after years of losing direction. He said he tried to stand up by forcing himself to be strong, by pushing himself to overcome. But that only exhausted him. I told him, you cannot lift yourself with harshness. You can only lift yourself with compassion. Compassion does not make you weak. It makes you soft enough not to break. It slows you enough not to fall apart. It gives you space to breathe, to feel, to release what you have carried for too long without anyone noticing. The Samaritan lifted the wounded man onto his animal. In your life, this is the same as holding yourself when you want to give up, giving yourself rest, when you are exhausted, allowing yourself to cry, when you cannot bear any more, releasing expectations. So your heart can settle, telling yourself, I will not abandon myself again. Lifting yourself is not victory. Lifting yourself is returning. Returning to the highest part of you. Returning to the love that has never left you. Returning to what pain cannot touch. There will be days when you move one step at a time. Days when you breathe through each ache. Days when you hold on to the smallest thing to keep from collapsing. And there will be days when you must lift yourself, not with strength, but with permission. Permission to be weak. Permission to rest. Permission to heal. Permission to believe you are worthy of being lifted like anyone else. I want to say this, and I want you to hear it with your heart. You have never abandoned anyone in your life. So why would you abandon yourself? You may no longer need someone else to be the Samaritan for your story. Because you can be that person. You can learn to lift yourself. And one day when someone else needs it, you will have the strength to lift them too, not from sacrifice, but from a heart that knows how to stand without becoming hard. Before we continue, I want to invite you to leave a small sign, not for me, but for your own life, that you are ready to walk this path. If you truly want to learn how to lift yourself again, leave a comment saying, once more I choose to rise. Just one sentence. But sometimes one sentence is enough to change the direction of a life. There is a truth I have seen quietly reveal itself in every healing journey we suffer, not only because of the wound, but because of the feeling of separation. People do not break because of sadness, they break because they believe they must face that sadness alone. People do not lose direction because of failure, they lose direction because they believe failure has disconnected them from their own worth. In the old story, what pushed the wounded man into despair was not only the beating, it was the fact that 3 times he was left behind. 3 glances that passed without stopping. 3 footsteps that crossed to the other side. 3 reminders whispering you are alone. And in that most isolated moment, the Samaritan appeared. Not to prove anything, not to teach, not to judge, but to dissolve the greatest illusion of pain, the illusion that you are separate from love. True love does not only soothe wounds, it breaks the invisible wall between you and the world, between you and yourself, between you and the sacred presence that has always been with you. When the Samaritan bent down, that gesture held a message deeper than words: you are not alone. And that one message, though spoken silently into the soul, changed the destiny of the wounded man. In your life, I believe you too have known moments when you felt abandoned. Days when even with people around you, the distance felt impossibly wide. Nights when your prayers seemed to fall into a void. Moments when you looked around and saw no one close enough to understand, no one deep enough to touch the place in you that needed comfort the most. But that is only the illusion of pain. It is never the truth. The truth is, you have never been separate from love. You are simply standing on the other side of the road, and the pain is too heavy for you to see the bridge waiting for you. The Samaritan symbolizes the part of you that knows connection is stronger than fear, compassion is stronger than defensiveness. Love is deeper than any reason to turn away. So the question becomes this: if that Samaritan part is always within you, why are there moments when you cannot feel love? Let me offer you a gentle yet sharp truth. Love cannot touch the places you keep closed. It cannot touch the places where you isolate yourself. It cannot touch the places where you say no one will understand me. It cannot touch the belief that you are unworthy. But love does not give up. It simply waits like the Samaritan for you to open even the smallest space for it to enter. That door opens when you do something very simple: one deep breath, one gentle sentence to yourself, one decision to release an old thought, one small act of kindness, one quiet promise: I will not abandon myself anymore. In that moment, you are no longer separate. You will find this strange yet beautiful: when you open your heart even a little to yourself, the world opens to you too. This is not magic. This is the law of consciousness. When you believe you are connected, you begin to see bridges where you once saw only walls. When you believe you deserve love, you begin to notice signs of love you once overlooked. I want to share something I have seen in thousands of people. Their deepest pain is the sense of not belonging. Not belonging to family, not belonging to work, not belonging to community, not belonging to their own life. But the nature of the soul is connection. The nature of love is union. The nature of life is the meeting of things that seem separate. Love never stands still. It always searches for a way in. Like water finds a crack. Like light finds a window. Like the Samaritan finds his way to the one in pain. And in the same way, a stream of love is trying to find its way to you right now, right here. The only thing you must do is not build more walls against it. Do not condemn yourself. Do not shrink back. Do not turn yourself into a burden. Do not push yourself out of your own heart. The only place love cannot enter is the place you lock. And the first place love appears is the place where you dare to take one small step out of your loneliness, one step toward connection, one gentle sentence, one honest moment, one breath of openness, one decision to trust a little more. That is all it takes for the bridge to appear. No perfection needed, no complete readiness, no certainty about where the road leads. Only the belief that you are not separate and you have never been. There is something I believe every seasoned heart will eventually understand at some point in life. Pain does not come to destroy you. It comes to teach you what peace cannot teach. No soul grows in days of gentle winds. We grow in the exact moments when everything inside us feels like it is falling apart. And in those moments, a quiet truth appears: pain is the teacher no one wants, yet the teacher everyone needs. In the story of the Good Samaritan, there is a detail many people miss: the silence of the wounded man. He does not speak. He does not call out. He does not explain. He does not justify. He lies there in a state where all the strength to pretend has disappeared. He has no energy left to maintain an image, no mind to hide anything, no reasoning to explain anything. Only the bare truth remains: he is in pain. And it is exactly at that point, the lowest and most fragile point, that his teacher appears. Not in the form of a scholar, not a leader, not a strong figure, but as a moment when pain has made him still long enough for love to come close. The same is true for you. I have seen many people run from their pain as if running from an enemy. But pain does not chase you. It simply waits, waiting for you to slow down enough to learn the lesson you have been avoiding. And that lesson is not punishment. It is revelation. Pain teaches you to see what truly matters and what is only noise. Pain teaches you where you are weak and where you are stronger than you believe. Pain teaches you honesty, not honesty with others, but with yourself. Pain teaches you to release what you can no longer carry. But more than anything, pain teaches you how to listen. When you are wounded, you are forced into a little silence. And in that silence, you hear what the busyness of daily life made you forget. You hear your own breath. You hear thoughts you once rushed past. You hear whispers from parts of yourself you have never touched. And inside those small sounds lies the great truth you have missed. I once asked a woman after a major collapse in her life, what hurts you most? She said it hurts because I feel like I became someone else. I looked at her and said no. You did not become someone else. You are simply seeing your true self, the part that was hidden under too many roles. Pain has the power to strip away the layers you wore to be loved, to be accepted, to appear strong, to keep others from seeing your weakness. It lets you face your essence without decorations, without explanations, without defense. And that facing is the root of healing. We often think the Samaritan is the main character. But the wounded man is also the main character because without the pain, there would be no chance for love to reveal itself. Without fragility, your strength cannot show. Without collapse, there is no reason to rise. Pain shows you where you lived against yourself. Pain shows you what you have been holding that no longer fits. Pain shows you the emotions you buried that are still alive. Pain shows you that you are tired, truly tired, and you need a different direction. And the beautiful thing about pain is this: it does not lie. You can pretend to be at peace when you are not. You can pretend to be strong when you are weak. You can pretend to be fine when you are falling apart. But pain does not pretend with you, and it does not allow you to pretend anymore. That is why it becomes the most patient teacher. I have met souls who thought they were breaking, but in truth they were being refined. Their surface cracked so a deeper layer could appear. What they lost was not punishment, it was release. And what remained were the things worth building a life upon. If you are in a season of pain, a breaking, a long ache, a betrayal, a deep disappointment, I want you to hear this slowly: pain is not the end. It is a doorway, not a doorway out of life, but a doorway back into life, into what is true, sacred, and lasting within you. You do not need to love your pain, but you can learn from it. And when you learn what it came to teach, it will leave as quietly as it came. Just as the wounded man was lifted, tended, cared for, and then returned to a new path, pain will bring you to a chapter you were not ready for before. Pain does not come to finish you. Pain comes to open you. When the Samaritan finished tending the wounds, lifted the injured man onto his animal, and took him to the inn, he did something many people often overlook. He entrusted the wounded man to the innkeeper. He did not stay to watch every breath. He did not try to do everything by himself. He did not hold on to the role of a savior until exhaustion. He knew he had done his part, and he knew when it was time to place the rest into another set of hands. To me, this is one of the most delicate expressions of mature love. Love is not holding on forever. Love is not staying until you collapse. Love is not carrying everything to prove your goodness. True love knows its limits, and it knows the limits of others. And this knowing becomes the foundation of lasting healing. In life, you may be the Samaritan for someone, for a friend, for family, for a partner, or even for a stranger. You can bend down 10 lift guide. But there will be a moment when you must learn what the Samaritan learned. Not everything is your responsibility. I have seen many gentle hearts break, not because they loved too little, but because they did not know when to stop. They wanted to help so much that they forgot they were human. They wanted to save others so much that they lost the ability to save themselves. They carried an illusion that if they did not do everything, everything would fall apart. But the paradox is this: that very effort twists love out of its true shape. It becomes a weight. It becomes quiet resentment. It becomes accumulated exhaustion. And eventually they become too tired to love what they once wanted to protect. The Samaritan did not let that happen. He knew love is giving, not clinging. Lifting, not carrying, in place of walking with, not possessing. He brought the injured man to the inn because he knew that healing requires a space he could not provide. It required long-term care he could not stay to give. It required rest, stillness, and an environment fit for recovery. And the most beautiful part is this: he did not feel guilty for handing over. He was not afraid of judgment. He did not think he had done too little. He knew something important: when you do your part well, You do not need to do someone else's part. This is a lesson many compassionate souls need to hear because compassion is often mistaken for endless duty. I once met a young woman who came to me in a state of collapse. She had been supporting a friend through a difficult season, but after months, she was the one who fell apart. I asked her, "Do you know when to let go?" She said, "I am afraid if I let go, she will fall." I looked at her and said gently, "When you carry things for her, you are not helping her stand. You are only delaying the day she learns to stand on her own." The Samaritan understood this. He did his part with his whole heart. Then he stopped, and he allowed the wounded man the chance to rise again on his own feet. The same is true for you. There are wounds no one can heal for you. There are lessons no one can learn for you. There are paths no one can walk in your place, no matter how much they love you. Limits are not weakness. Limits are the foundation of every healthy relationship with others and with yourself. When you know your limits, you keep your heart. When you do not know your limits, you lose yourself while trying to hold others. In this journey, I want you to understand something. Love is not the unconditional sacrifice of yourself until you are empty. Love is being honest with yourself about what you can and cannot do. Think about this. The Samaritan did not carry the injured man the whole way. He used his animal. That is wisdom. He entrusted the man to the innkeeper. That is humility. He promised to return. That is devotion. The Samaritan did not save through muscle. He saved through clarity of heart. And a clear heart always knows where it is needed and where it no longer belongs. So today I want to ask you something as a way for you to look within. Is there something in your life you are holding on to, even though your heart knows it is time to hand it over? It may be a relationship. It may be a responsibility. It may be an old wound you keep trying to solve alone. It may be a role you have played for too long. Ask your heart. It knows the answer. And when you dare to admit that truth, you will see something gentle and miraculous. The place where you stop at the right time is always the place where love begins to heal you more deeply. There is something I often reflect on every time I read the story of the Good Samaritan. Nothing in that journey happens in haste. Everything unfolds in a slow and steady rhythm, grounded in presence. And that is the rhythm every human heart needs in order to heal. When the wounded man is taken to the inn, the story enters a quiet pause. No more cries, no more chaos, no more hurried footsteps. Only a space created for recovery, a place safe enough for the wound to begin closing. I believe this is a symbolic image of what every soul needs at some point in life, a meaningful rest. Not rest because you are giving up. Not rest because you are weak. But rest to return to your true rhythm. Rest so life inside you can catch up with you. Rest so peace can enter and do the work no effort of yours can do. In modern life, people fear stopping more than anything else. They fear that if they pause, they will fall behind. They fear that if they stay silent, they will face what they have been avoiding. They fear that if they stop running, old pain will catch up with them. But the truth is the opposite. It is not pain chasing you. It is you running so pain has no chance to heal. When the Samaritan placed the wounded man in the inn, he offered him the most precious gift. A hurting heart needs time, space, and safety for peace to return. I have met many people who say they want to heal, yet they demand results immediately. They want their heart to stop hurting the next day. They want old sadness to vanish simply because they have understood it. But the heart does not operate through reasoning. The heart operates through time, gentleness, and permission to recover in its own rhythm. Healing is not an event. Healing is a process, soft, steady, quiet. I always say this: no one stands up the day after a deep fall. But anyone can stand up when they are placed in the right space. And what is that space? It is a small corner of calm in your life, even just a few minutes a day, where you can breathe and listen. It is a place where you do not need to look strong. It is a safe relationship where you can speak your truth without fear of judgment. It is a small ritual that brings you back to yourself: a cup of tea, a journal page, a moment of prayer, a slow breath. It is anything that allows you to pause long enough for the wounded part of you to contract and begin mending. When I look at human life, I see that not everyone is defeated by pain, but many are exhausted by the lack of space to heal. They move from one wound to another without rest. They carry too much that does not belong to them without putting anything down. They try to be strong for too long until endurance becomes habit, and habit becomes a prison. But the Samaritan shows us a different picture. Healing does not happen in motion. It happens in the pause. I once had a student who went through a great loss. For months she tried to return to normal life, working more, concentrating, more, staying busy. She said it was her way of moving on. But the more she ran, the more tired she became. The more she filled her days, the emptier she felt. One day she came to me, her eyes deep and empty, as if there was nothing left inside her. I asked her, when was the last time you let yourself sit down and truly feel your pain? She lowered her head and said, I'm afraid if I stop, the pain will swallow me. I told her, no, it is only waiting to be held. Pain does not swallow you. Pain only wants to be seen. From that day on, she began giving herself 10 or 15 minutes each day to sit in silence, not trying to be strong, not trying to be joyful, not trying to forget. And something gentle happened. Peace returned. Not immediately, but slowly, like water soaking into dry ground. That is the nature of healing. It is not loud, but it is certain. I want you to understand this with your heart. You cannot heal in a life that never stops. You must create a place for your heart to rest. The Samaritan brought the wounded man to an inn, not to abandon him, but to give him a space to recover. You must do the same for yourself. Ask yourself, where is my inn? What place in my life can become the space where I breathe deeply and begin again? Am I allowing myself to heal, or am I forcing myself to push on? And most of all, where is my peace, and am I allowing it to enter? Only when you have such a place will your pain know its way out and peace know its way back to you. When the story of the Samaritan reaches its final scene, I often pause for a long time at one very small moment that carries immense meaning: the moment when the wounded man opens his eyes in a safe space and realizes he is still alive, and realizes that a hand has crossed fear and prejudice to touch his wound. A moment that seems ordinary yet marks the return of the most precious thing in every human being: the inner light. I call that light faith, not faith in religion or people or luck, but faith in the sacred movement within your life, whether you are aware of it or not. Faith that no pain is meaningless and no broken journey is the end. Faith that love never truly leaves you. Sometimes you only turn your back on it for too long. I have seen that light awaken in many hearts that believed they had gone dark. And each time it awakens, it carries the same gentle message: you are still worthy no matter what you have just gone through. When I tell you this story, what I truly want is not for you to remember every detail. What I want is for your inner light, the light that hardship may have dimmed, to see itself again. Because the truth is this: you are not your pain. You are not your abandonments. You are not your failures, the dismissals, the judgments. You are not what others have done to you. You are not the mistakes that keep you awake at night. You are the part of you that still wants to rise. You are the part of you that still believes something good is ahead. You are the part of you that wants to love even after being hurt. You are the part of you that has been listening to me through all 16 parts, because the deepest place in you knows these words are for you. When the Samaritan left the inn, he left a promise that he would return. That promise is not only for the wounded man, it is for you. It reminds you that within you There is always a source of love, of wisdom, of strength, and that source always returns at the moment you need it most. We often think love is an emotion, but in my experience, love is a current. When you let it run through your life, it creates order. When you block it, it waits. When you open a path, it flows without effort. In this final chapter, I want to leave you with 3 things to carry after this journey ends, like 3 small stones for you to step on as you continue on your own path. First, you do not walk alone. Even if life has given you reasons to doubt this, look back at every moment you thought you would not make it, you still made it. This means something greater than you, deeper than you, has been lifting you. Trust that support because it has never left you, not once. Second, your peace is not lost. It is simply covered by noise. Like the wounded man lying in the shadow of fear, your peace may lie deep under layers of sadness, anger, or disappointment. But with even a moment of stillness, with even a small space, you give your heart, that peace begins to rise. It has always been there. Third, what you are seeking is also coming toward you. Many people think they must struggle to reach hope, to reach meaning, to reach love. But the truth is, these things already belong to you. Your journey is not to find them, but to remove what has been covering them. And that is why this journey, the one we walk together through these 16 parts, matters. It does not take you somewhere new. It brings you back. Back to where love is not a dream, but your nature. Back to where peace is not something you must fight for, but something as natural as breath. Back to where you see yourself, not through wounds or losses, but through light. When I tell this story, I do not tell it for you to admire the Samaritan. I tell it so you recognize the Samaritan in you. That part has always been there. That part is still alive. That part will carry you through your hardest roads. Now, as you stand at the end of this story, I want you to do something very small, but powerful enough to open a new journey. Place your hand on your chest. Take a slow breath and whisper inside, I return. Not returning to the past, not returning to pain, not returning to what has been lost, but returning to yourself, to the brightest, most whole, most resilient part of you. If you still carry any wound, let this story remain in you as a reminder that you are not alone and you are not left behind. If you are seeking peace, know that peace is seeking you. And if you are beginning again, trust that beginning again is a form of grace. Finally, I want to thank you. Thank you for staying until the end. Thank you for opening your heart to each word. Thank you for choosing to walk a journey not everyone dares to walk. You deserve the peace your soul is seeking, and I believe with all the stillness in my heart that you will find it.